obviously right next door to the Robert E. Howard house. Some of you have seen photographs of it. And one of the famous things about the Butler house is when Robert E. Howard was working in this little tiny room here with the windows open, he liked to type, but he also liked to sound his stories aloud, you know. He ripped off her skirt, you know, things like that. And at various times, Mrs. Butler was over here, and she could hear him. And as he was typing and talking loud, and she would tell him to be quiet, Hester Howard, Bob's mom, would scream out to her, "Be quiet because my son is working." So right out of that room is where the noise came, but Mom was there to protect him.
The Butlers had kids, and so they were, one of the boys was just a couple years older than Bob, so they would hang out together. So if you've ever seen the photos of Bob with the swords, and there's 2 or 3 people standing around doing these salutes and fake pirate fight things, that was the Butlers. Those photos came from the Butlers. They were, Patrice was good enough to talk them out of them, so to let us see them, which was very handy. There used to be, somewhere in here was a big, massive live oak, and for those of you from Texas know, live oaks get gigantic here with age, and the kids would climb and play in it all the time. There was also a real large mulberry tree right here along the fence line, which has long since vanished from the earth. That's a mesquite. You don't want to climb that. That would hurt. They have thorns. And then they always seem to get along, although Leroy, who's the boy that played with Bob a lot, said that they always got along until after, when he got older and got married, he came to see Mrs. Howard. She got kind of cold to him, and it was because he couldn't understand why, and he asked his mom later, and she said, "Oh, we had a fight. Me and her had a fight, so now, you know, she doesn't like you either." And he's like, "Well, okay." I think we're ready to repair to the front of the house.
Yeah. One thing we got to tell you about the Butler house. The Butler house was knocked off its foundation in 1994.
A tornado.
An M2 tornado came through Cross Plains, tore up the roof pretty good, and messed up the yard and tore down the fence. But the Butler house was taken off of its foundations, and so they just knocked it down and took it away. And then Project Pride bought the area where the pavilion is now.
Yeah. So when the Howards came here in September 1919, they paid a whopping $1,500 for this house, which included a $500 cash up front, $250 a year on promissory notes at 10% interest to pay it off. The original measurement on this said the lot was supposed to be exactly a 1/4 acre based on starting from wherever the block marker started. So it should have been, assuming that's really true, about 200 feet long, about 107 feet across. It should be the proper lot size. And maybe those fences have been moved a little. I don't know. I'm an intellectual property guy, not a real property guy. I can't speak to that. So, and I'm not getting involved. So,
you'll notice a couple of features of the house. If you'll think about the photos of Robert E. Howard, well, the one photo where he's got that big schooner of beer and he's drinking it, that was taken right in front of the Dr. Howard residence sign. He's standing right next to the stairs. And hope you remember a photo of young Bob with his dog Patch. It was taken right here at the picket fence with the house in the background. And at that time, I think they used the back entrance for more to get into the house, because the porch was entirely covered with pots and plants and all kinds of stuff.
and Mrs. Howard was big in flowers. She would keep a lot of stuff when she was younger and healthier. She kept a lot of stuff up. She did. She had morning glories covering the porch. She had roses all over the place. She had crepe myrtles everywhere, and she liked those. petunias in the window boxes, and it all looked fabulous. By the time Novelin got here, she described walking up the walkway and saying it was just kind of an average-looking place in an average-looking neighborhood. It didn't look especially nice, didn't look especially bad. It was just kind of here. And then that Dr. Howard residence sign, if I remember right, that came out of the cellar and back, didn't it?
Well, you know, when we did the archaeological dig in the background, and we're going to meet Jeff Shanks back there to tell us about it. The story was that the original sign got thrown into the garbage pit in the backyard.
Yeah.
And but before that happened, they took it inside the house. The owners of the house, Mr. Carter, he took the sign into the house. So that was a Howard artifact that we were searching for. Didn't find it. You know, we were hoping the sign was in the pit along with the typewriter, but
in the car.
And Mr. Herman here took care of the writing table. You've all seen the writing table. Well, that is due totally to this young fellow right here.
Project Pride.
He's like a dog on a bone about this table, and he rescued it from Missouri. And boy, let's give him a round of applause for paying for our table is home. Yeah, Bob Howard's table is home.
There used to be a great big pecan tree in the northeast corner up here. The highway this didn't used to be a straight highway to Abilene. It used to wind, I think, back around that way towards the other end of town, and it was quite a mess getting around here back then. The roads were a wee bit higgly-piggly, to use the technical term, in case you ever wanted to see it. And then apparently Rusty liked to tell the story about one of his favorite stories that Tevis and Bob were telling one time was they made a fool's package. They set it out there on the road, very showy little package, and he waited, hid behind a tree and waited until sure enough the mayor happens to come by, stops, gets over, picks up the package and looks at it, and on the other side of it it says, "Put me back down so I can catch the next sucker." And the guy put it back down and drove off. Gotta like that, so.
How old was Robert when he moved here?
It was 1919, he was 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if you saw Rob's thing yesterday. He must have lived 6 or 8 different places before he got here, just every couple of years, constantly in motion.
Yeah.
And in a broad range of environments. If you've ever been to the East Texas dark piney woods,
Yeah.
compared to the far out West Texas and the dirt and the dust, or up by Wichita Falls and the Alkali Flats, it's very wild mix of places to see in one state. So I think we're ready to go around.
I think so.
Side of the house.
And if you have any questions, just shout them out.
Yeah, don't be shy.
When did this become a dry county?
Well, it's no longer dry.
Was it dry when he was drinking that big beer in front of the...
The country was dry when he was
Oh, that's
drinking that
right.
beer.
Duh. Okay.
But
And Schlitz didn't pay him a penny for that endorsement.
Exactly right.
Probably never will.
Probably never will. So, our kitchen window here used to be a bed of mint. And Bob would like to mix his own crushed mint in whiskey sours and highballs. And he said he had some kind of unconventional recipe for mint juleps, though he never wrote it down, and the secret has been lost forever. So I'm pretty disappointed.
And since this has all been written, there used to be a garden back here, and there was a viney wall that some of you may have seen. There's a picture of Mrs. Howard with Patch. It's the best picture of Patch that we have. I don't know what kind of dog he is, but he's standing there proud, and she's dressed in what looks like her nightgown. Be that as it may, there's also a picture from this side of the house of Howard bending over petting his dog. Some of you may have seen that, and that's where this is too. Should we get to the grizzly part right here?
You want to do it here? You want to do it back there?
Let's do it here.
Rusty saved it for last. We can do it early.
Right.
Yeah. So part of
we'll save the bad stuff for last.
the bad stuff for last. It'll be a real downer. That's what we do here. So that's how we celebrate around here. So let's walk on around the back here. So out back here behind the house, there was a garage garage slash shed slash outbuilding that was maybe 30 feet long. Don't chart. About 30 feet long. And supposedly it was open facing that way. And then down at one end it had some double doors on one section of it. And they used to talk about being able to both park their cars there, though it might have been a little snug, but they could both park their cars inside if they wanted to. And that's where they kept all their other gear too. And of course, one of the stories Bob told Novelin was he was out working on his car. And he doesn't mean doing mechanical work, because he couldn't do anything. That was not his sport. But he was just cleaning it up, getting it ready for a date with Novelin. He said, I was out working on my car this morning, trying to get it cleaned up for tonight. While I was working like a fool, I was talking, trying to figure out something about a yarn I was stuck on. I wasn't talking too loud, but I got to a place where old Conan was fighting, and I said, "Fool, dog of hell, die!" About that time, a timid little voice said, "Robert, is your mother home?" I turned around, and there was your friend, Mrs. Jackson, looking as if she didn't know whether to run or stay there. And I just wanted to go through the ground or grab my gun out of the car and shoot myself. He was so embarrassed, you know.
Take a flick on it.
Thank you, sir. They also used it as part of the barn space. They went through a range of animals they owned over the years. They had a cow, and they maybe had more than one cow, but the cow was always named Delhi, not Delhi, Delhi.
And horses too, and Bob was particularly fond of cats. Well, or they were particularly fond of him, because they would congregate here and he would feed every darn one of them.
He also, when Mrs. Howard got further along in her illness, she couldn't tolerate dairy anymore. He got some goats to get goat milk. Adding to that, not on the notes here, we'll talk about McDonough later. He was there were some neighbors lived back here named McDonough who had more cows and more stuff. And they had excess milk and cheese and butter and eggs and stuff. And so young Will McDonough would walk up, and he was sent over here to deliver stuff periodically. And I got to interview him,